Hello everyone! As you can see, I'm ready for the spooky season. So today we're going to make these little cuties together. This is my very first crochet pattern. It's a friendly ghost keychain, and today we're going to make it together in a video tutorial. Before we begin, I would like to say that while this is very beginner friendly, it doesn't go step by step in explaining every kind of stitch and method that I use. So it doesn't explain exactly how to make a magic ring or how to single crochet or how to increase or decrease, but it does go very slowly, and I will link more in detail tutorials for every single stitch I use in the description of this video. That said, this is my very first video tutorials, and while I ask you to be patient and maybe a bit kind in your comments, I do also ask you to give me all the feedback you can think of if you think I can do better, or if something was not explained entirely or properly. I'm happy to do so with either in the comments or in a short, or just if it's general feedback, keep it in mind for my next tutorial. So yeah, with all that said, let's get started with the video. So today we're going to make this little keychain ghosties together. They're really cute and they work well as keychains, as you can see. They're relatively small, I'd say about maybe 10 to 15 centimeters long. I will try to convert that into inches afterwards. I'd say under 6 inches, but yeah, they're relatively fast to make. I would say they shouldn't take more than half an hour. It takes me about 25 minutes to do everything, including attaching the keychain, which I like to sew on rather than just use clippers or something like that to put it together, because I'm not very good at that. It never works out well for me. So yeah, let's get started and make one of these cuties. By the way, you can make this in various sizes. You can make it bigger and smaller and with finer yarn as you prefer. It's pretty much adjustable. The only thing you will need to pay attention to is the placement of the arms, because this might change slightly. But let's get started. In order to make this cutie, we will need yarn, of course. Today I am using something that's a sort of a house brand for a chain of supermarkets called Tokmani. I've not used this before, but I'm trying it now. It's 120 meters to 100 grams. I don't think they have the measurements in yards, but it is very similar to either Honey Bunny or Baby Snuggle by Hobby. That would be 131 yards for a 3.5 ounces skein. Of course, the recommended needle size and hook size is somewhere between 6 and 6.5, but today we're going to use a number 5 crochet hook, but this one is it's been through a lot. Like, Nala tried to eat it a couple of times, but this is still my favorite to make amigurumi with when I need a number 5 hook. You can go down to a 4.5 or even a 4 to make this a bit smaller. You will also need some safety eyes. What I have here are 10mm safety eyes. You can also sew them in if you so prefer. Something to cut yarn with. I really like this particular tool. And a stitch marker, of course. And right at the end, a yarn needle. Let's get started. Just bear in mind that while this tutorial is beginner friendly, it's not a full step-by-step tutorial in terms of how to make the stitches. So we will be starting with a magic ring, and this is the way I do it. Start here, make an X, go under, pull the yarn and slip stitch into it, into the loop you just pulled, and then we're going to do 6 as loose as possible single crochets into the magic ring. I like to start pulling on it early on because I find it makes it easier for me to deal with this kind of yarn that can be a bit finicky. Okay, and now we'll completely pull it together. And there we are. We have our first row. I'm going to place my stitch marker in the last stitch, and then we'll move on to round number 2, which is a round of increases. So in each of the 6 single crochets, we're going to make an increase. Now I like to crochet over this tail just to make sure it's more secure, but of course you don't have to. You could also like use a needle and just make sure it stays in place. It doesn't generally move or open or whatever, but I remember seeing a video once and now being completely paranoid about my magic ring coming undone on an amigurumi piece I sold, so I'm making sure it's extra secure. A couple more stitches to increase into, and at the end of this row you should have 12 stitches total. And then you should place the stitch marker into the last stitch of the row. There we are. See? The next row is also an increase row. We'll do 1 single crochet, 1 increase, repeat 6 times. So 1 single crochet, 1 increase, and again 1 single crochet, 1 increase, and we're going to do this around 6 times, and at the end of this row we should be having 18 stitches to work with. Okay, and move the stitch markers. Now the next 2 rows, rows 4 and 5, are just crocheting 18 single crochets around, so no increases, nothing. We'll just do 2 rows of 18 single crochets. And when you're done with your 2 rows, we'll go on to decrease, because this is pretty much the peak of our ghosty head. This is a pretty small pattern, so we can't make the head too big, because otherwise it will end up being too big for a keychain. Now repeat this for another row and I'll meet you right back. For round number 6, we will do everything we've done so far, but in reverse. So instead of 1 single crochet, 1 increase, we'll do 1 single crochet, 1 decrease. I like to do invisible decreases, and to do those, I just put my hook through the front loop of the first stitch, then the one of the second stitch, pull a loop through, and then finish my single crochet. I feel like this looks way better than single crocheting 2 together. But you don't have to do that. If you prefer the other method, it won't change the pattern much. So we'll do 1 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeat that 6 times, and that will leave us with a total of 12 stitches. There we are. Before we move on to the next row, I like to place my eyes right now, the safety eyes. So the way you do it, you place them in between rows 4 and 5, 2 to 3 stitches apart. And I try to, like, if you can see, they're kind of in the middle, but not really. Where you put them is not extremely important. the only thing it can affect is the placement of the hands and how the little tail turns. As you can see, they're not exactly the same because I can't like place them in the exact same spot every time. If it bothers you that the eyes and their hands are not perfectly aligned, for example, this little one seems to be looking to the side a bit, then you can either adjust the eyes, you can glue them in at the end, or you can sew them, and that makes it way easier. Or if you're like me and you don't really care, because this is a floaty ghost, and the more derpy it looks, the better, then it's fine. Or the other thing you can do is just adjust the placements of the little hands later on. With our eyes in place, we can move on, but what I'd like to do is start stuffing the head now before the next row of decreases, because I feel it makes it easier to shape it properly. Also, there's a piece of hair that doesn't belong here. A lot of people with long hair in my house, except for me, of course, because mine is very short these days. For row number 7, we'll have 6 decreases, and this will bring the number of stitches on our little ghosty heads to 6. Again, I'm doing invisible decreases, but you really don't have to. If you feel like the others are easier or look better, it's definitely a preference, not a requirement. Okay, and then of course I could mess up a stitch. Now, before I replace my stitch marker, I will continue to fill up the head and make it fluffy and as round as possible. To keep it from turning into a little triangle here, I like to push the yarn to the sides, so this makes it a bit rounder. I really don't like to overstuff plushes because I feel like you need to be able to do this for it to be a successful little plush, but that's also a preference. We're pretty much done with the head, and we will move on to crocheting the body. Our next row will be an increase row. We'll do 1 single crochet and 1 increase, and repeat that 3 times, like so. I like to put a finger inside it. I realize how weird that sounds, but I like to do it because it keeps the stuffing inside and doesn't get caught into the stitches, which then makes it harder to keep it like clean and fuzz free. But of course you don't have to do that. Now we'll continue to increase. For our next row, it will be 2 single crochets and 1 increase. We'll repeat that 3 times and we'll get to 12 stitches. And the last repeat. On this next row, we will be creating our little hands, the ghosty hands. And the way we do that is we first do 4 single crochets, like so, and then we chain 4, and we'll start crocheting in the second chain from the hook. So we will do 2 slip stitches in this one, which will give it a little handy shape, and then 2 more slip stitches down the chain, and the final one in the same stitch as our beginning. single crochet. Okay, there we go. Now we'll do 4 more single crochets. And do the hand again. So 1, 2, 3, 4 chains, 2 slip stitches in the second chain from the hook, then 2 more slip stitches down the chain, and 1 final slip stitch in the beginning stitch. Okay, and now what's left is 4 more single crochets. There we are. And here we are, the little boy with his little hands. Hey! Now, if you want him to be less derpy and less looking to the side, you can of course move this 1 stitch over. So you could do 5 single crochets and then do the hands. But like I said, I find it cute, so I didn't really adjust it on any of them. But of course, if you add the eyes at the end because you prefer to glue them or to sew them in, this won't be a problem at all. You have a completely different choice. Now for the next round, we're going to do 12 single crochets, and pay attention to the stitches with the handies, because you will be stitching in the initial single crochet and you will be skipping the slip stitch. Okay, and move past it around the little arm. Oh my god, if I can get my hook into it, that would be great. And do another 4, and again make sure to skip the slip stitch and only focus on the single crochets, so you can have 12 of them. Now you can stop here and make sure the little neck of the ghost is well filled. Okay, and maybe even fill the body a little bit. I like to stuff as I go, as it's easier to shape this into whatever I want it to be. For the next row, we're going to do 1 single crochet and 1 increase. Repeat that 6 times, and that will bring us to 18 stitches total, which will match the top width of our head as well. There we go. For row 13, we will do 18 single crochets around. And after this row, we will begin our decreases. I forgot to say, I'm using the a cross between yarn over and yarn under. I go under when I pull the loop through the stitch and over when I go through both of them to create a single crochet. I don't know why. This feels best to me, well, easiest and most natural to me. It doesn't have to be this way or another. I think this is mostly a preference thing. Okay, now that we've gotten to 18, we're going to start decreasing, and the first decrease is pretty straightforward. 1 single crochet, 1 decrease, and we repeat that 6 times. And there we are. We're mostly done with our body. We'll now just have to continue to decrease to form the tail looking end of the ghostie, and we'll be done. It now is a good time to stuff him some more. Just so we make sure he looks nice in the end. And remember, once you start doing the decreases for the tail, it will be a bit harder to stuff. So make sure if you need to add stuffing, you do it after every row. For our row 15, we're going to do 1 single crochet and then 3 consecutive decreases. There we are. And single crochet in our remaining stitches, which would be 5. At the end of this row, you should have 9 stitches total. And as you can see, the tail is already, the pointy end is already starting to shape. Okay? For the next row, we're going to do 1 single crochet, 2 more decreases, and crochet in the remaining 4 stitches. This will bring our total to 7 stitches. And as I said, remember to stuff your little guy to your desired stuffiness, fluffiness, something like that. Of course, you can make the appearance of the tail stronger if you just put your stuffing to this side and don't push too much to this one. Okay. Our next row will be 1 single crochet, 2 decreases, and 2 single crochets. And this will bring our total to 5. The row after this will be a bit trickier because it's getting tighter. I ran out of stuffing, so just a sec. I thought I had brought enough, but not really. Oh, I had some more here. Great. That is ADHD blindness for you. It was a bit behind the little ghostie, so I didn't see it at all. Makes sense. Okay, I think this is more than enough stuffing. I don't want to overstuff him either, like I said. Oh, he looks so derpy and cute. I like them so much. This is why I make so many amigurumis, because it's just so fun. For the last decrease row, it will be 2 single crochets. 1 and 2. And then 1 decrease. And then 1 single crochet in this last stitch. Can remove this for now. Leave a tail. You need a tail to just sew this closed and then hide your yarn. The reason why I'm doing it like this and leaving it longer is because, like I said, I prefer to sew in my keychain hardware. Now, it would be nice if I knew where I put mine, but I don't, so I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back with my little hardware thing that turns it into a keychain. And to do all that, we're going to thread our yarn tail through the yarn needle and then go around the front loops of the 4 remaining stitches. Pull tight and remove the fluffies. Of course remove the fluffies because this is plush yarn, so why wouldn't there be any fluffies? Now what I like to do is to put it through the end of the tail and pull it up somewhere up on the body. This gives it a bit more of a twisty twist. Okay. Hey, there we go. And now I will go up and go into the head. And hope this doesn't make too much of a mess. It does, of course it does, because fluffy yarn, man. Fluffy yarn, what can you do? And now what I do is I make sure I go kind of off to the dead center of the first row. Put my yarn through the last chain on this hardware piece. And then put it back in through the center. Okay? And go out somewhere at the bottom of the head. Like to pull it tight, but not too tight, because we don't want to mess with the shape of the head. And now I'm going to go up, kind of in the same general area, like in between 2 stitches of row 1. Go through that same little loop, this metal loop here, and go down through the dead center. I like to do this about 3 to 4 times. Find it that's enough to keep the thing secure. Now, this might turn like less fluffy in time, but the thread in the middle is not that flimsy, so this will be quite secure. Okay, now I'm going to go through here one more time and maybe down the body just to make sure this is extra secure. Okay, and to the side, and then cut whatever excess is left and pull it back into the body to act as extra stuffing. And you're pretty much done. See? One more ghosty done. And there we are. Of course we can make worsted weight ones and other smaller versions of this, but I like this fluffy yarn. I think they're not too big for a keychain, especially if you have a lot of keys like I do, because I have my key card for the car and my house keys and things like that. But yeah, this is it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got less fluffies than I did. And yeah, stay tuned. By the way, written version of this is available on my Instagram, and there's also a downloadable free PDF for those of you who would like to have printed patterns for their makes. I go between tutorials, like video tutorials and printed patterns and things like that. You can make as many ghosties as you want. You can sell them, you can do whatever you want, but I would definitely appreciate you giving me credit as the designer of this pattern and you know, not copying the tutorial. That would be great. There will be more free crochet tutorials on this channel, and while not all of them will be free to download as PDFs, I will try to keep costs for the written PDFs relatively low, at least on my own shop. So yeah, thank you for watching. Give me any feedback you would like, because this is my first ever tutorial that I filmed, so any input is highly appreciated. Oh, and yeah, just as an afterthought, this shouldn't take you more than half an hour to make. I was crocheting relatively slower than I usually do, and the raw footage of this is 35 minutes. So with all the breaks and loopers and everything, it got a bit longer. So I'd say it should be under 30 minutes, which makes it a pretty decent market make. So yeah, see you soon.